that and this one.
Got it all. Gotcha.
All right, we are at 1 o'clock, so let's get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Janik, and I work on the team that maintains the WISEstaff application along with Josh Roy. You may know him from the weekly user group calls that he hosts on Tuesdays. We also have Julie Hagan with us in the back of the room for any licensing questions that come up today. So we do have a slide presentation that will be available on the DPI website, but we're not going to focus on that for today's session. We're going to do more showing and doing and less just looking at slides and going through slides. So again, that will be available on the website if you do want to come back and look at it at any time. And we are recording this meeting, so that will be available as well. So just FYI that we are recording the meeting. So I want to start with a couple questions. Just by show of hands, who here is new to doing WISEstaff for the first time for 23-24? Ooh, okay, excellent. You're in the right place. And another show of hands, who here is literally new to WISEstaff in this calendar year, meaning somebody else did the preliminary data entry and now you're in charge of finishing it off? Okay, excellent. Another show of hands, who's in food coma and wants to take a nap? All right. So let's get started. Within WISEstaff, what we're going to cover today are the steps needed for doing your final certification. We're going to look at the staff collection checklist that will show you kind of step by step how to do those. We'll talk about some of the tools and tips available on that checklist, and then how to get to the pages where you're going to do each of those steps that are required for the final certification. We do have an open lab session after this session ends. That'll be at 2:15. If you have questions, just general questions as I'm going, please feel free to raise your hand and we can go through those questions as they come up. If you have questions where you need individual help, maybe about a specific staff person, if you could save those till the open lab, if you're available to rejoin or to stick around for that, that would be preferred, just so we're not talking about specific staff information. But any general questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll go through those as they come up. All right, so in WISEstaff, I'll just do very briefly on the navigation here. We've had our navigation in place for a couple years now. So your home menu is going to be where you get to the data quality dashboard and the staff collection checklist. And those are kind of the two core main things that you'll want to be looking at when you're coming into WISEstaff. The data quality dashboard is kind of like a landing page. It gives you a health check of your data. You can see by all the colors here that this district is not in great shape. This is our test data. I simulated all of this information. So just to be able to show the different examples of what you could see on your data quality dashboard. So we will look more at the data quality dashboard when we get into the data quality task on the checklist. But for now, I am going to navigate over to that staff collection checklist. We are in our test system, and it tends to be a little bit slower, so we'll just have a little patience here. As far as the other menus that we have up here at the top, they're kind of grouped by function. So Message Center has your change requests, notifications. You can see there's a page there. Person search is really just looking if you're trying to find a WISE ID or find a person. There's also the ability to report duplicate WISE IDs there. Manage staff data is a number of the screens needed to actually do the work to enter your staff data and review the information. Reports is just what it sounds like. We will be looking at a couple of these reports today. If you're not familiar with any of these, feel free to just kind of review those at some point. So we're always I'll just throw this in now that I'm thinking of it. We're always looking for feedback on the WISEstaff site and what's working, what's not working, what you might want to see, what would help make your job easier. So if in your job of entering the data or reviewing the data, you think that there would be a report or a group of data that would be really helpful for you to use to do the review of your contracts or your assignments or the whole staff together, and you don't see it in here, we would love to hear about that because we always want to be improving the application, making it easier for you all to use. So if you do think of something that you would want to suggest, the place to do that is on our resources tab. So this is just a couple kind of random pages in here. We've got the assignment code list, which is the list of all the possible assignment codes, whether a license is required for the assignment, whether grades are required to be reported for the assignment, your contact info, which is important for us to have so that we know who's currently in charge of doing the WISEstaff collection, so that when we're sending out our emails and including people in our user group calls, we're contacting the right folks. And then this is that WISEstaff feedback site. So that's where you're going to go and submit any suggestions that you have for improvements to the WISEstaff application. You can also vote on things that other people may have suggested as well. So now that our page has loaded and we're on the staff collection checklist, I'll just talk about the page kind of overall and the general functionality here. So everything on this page is grouped by, I wanted to make sure, is the size of the font okay for everybody in the back? Okay. We group the tasks on the checklist based on the time of year that we're in. So you can see kind of in the title of each section, the date range for each of those sections. So this first one here are the tasks that you should have been looking at before the collection opened, which was on September 29th of last year. So there's a couple things that you would want to do getting ready for the school year, which is verifying that contact information. Like I said, it's very important for us to have that. Making sure you've got WISE IDs and local person IDs for all staff in your agency, maybe some new staff that are with you this year that don't have a local person ID for your agency. So that person upload is the place to do that. And then reviewing any assignment code changes. So if we've got new positions that are offered this year, changes to positions, you'll find all of that information here. So that was step one. Step two is what we finished in November. So this period ran from September 29th when the collection opened through the 28th of November, which was our preliminary certification deadline for this school year. So the purpose of doing this preliminary certification period and the data entry for that is so that our licensing team can generate a preliminary audit of all of your staff in licensed assignments to make sure that they're holding the right license for that assignment. And that they are in the right position, teaching the right grades, things like that. So you have to have your assignments entered and you have to have entity IDs for your staff in order for that preliminary audit to be completed and successful for your district. So that's the purpose of this preliminary certification period. Again, that ended November 28th. Our licensing team generated those audit results, and that's the first thing that we'll look at in step 3 once we get there. One thing that was new for this school year is that we did not require the entry of contract information for that preliminary deadline. In years past, we always said you had to have your assignments and your contracts, meaning your salaries, loaded for the preliminary certification. But since that preliminary certification is truly just to run that licensing audit, and we don't use contract information in the audit, we thought, based on feedback from districts, that it's a lot to do at that time of year. So we kind of lifted that requirement and did not require you to have your contracts entered for that preliminary deadline. They will be required for the final deadline, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So that was step 2, and now we are in this period, step 3, working up to our final certification deadline. The steps involved in doing that, we renamed this a little bit since contracts were not required in the preliminary window. Now you'll want to be finalizing or loading, maybe for the first time, your contract information, correcting any assignment audit errors, and then the remainder of the tasks here have to do with data quality validation, making sure you don't have any data errors or warnings with the data that you do have entered. So a couple tips on how to use the different sections that we have on the checklist here. We do have a help link on each of these tiles, and if you click that, that gives you just a little bit more information about what each of these tasks entail. So you can see here for each of the tasks, 3A, 3B, what does that really mean? A little bit of information on how to do that task. So that is available with each of those sections. On the far left side, for each task, we have a status column, and that status column will show you if that task is technically done, but not really. So I'll give you an example. Load or finalize contract data. The system generates the check mark there when you have at least one contract entered. So the requirement of having contracts entered is technically fulfilled because you've got one in there. We don't know how many you're supposed to have for your district, so we just mark that as complete once you have at least one entered. So the system assigns those check marks for some of the tasks when the system can detect that the task has been started or completed. And there are other tasks here with a checkbox, and that's something that you can check off yourself to indicate that you've completed that. So that's kind of a nice way to make sure that you're checking off all of the tasks that are required for your final certification. If you see one that has this red circle with a line through it, that means it's not done, it's not considered completed, and that'll be something that you need to resolve before your final certification. Over here on the right-hand side, we have the count, and there's a little number bubble only for some of the tasks here when there's actually a quantity of items for that task. So for example, load or finalize contract data, I can see I've loaded 42 contracts so far. This one, which is 3B, is marked as incomplete because it does look like I have 2 missing entity IDs. And so that's a requirement for being able to complete your final certification is that you have entity IDs or at least acknowledged missing entity IDs for all of your staff. So let's dive into the step 3 tasks that you have for completing your final certification. The first one, oh, sorry, one more thing I want to mention. Any of the tasks that are in blue are clickable links that you can click on to go right to that page where you're going to view the data, enter the data, review the data, whatever the case may be. So you can see that some of these here don't have the blue link to them, but the majority do. So I'm going to click on that preliminary audit reports ready link, and that's going to take me to the audit report screen. And again, while that page is loading, this should be the first thing that you're doing once those audit reports are available. Those came out, Julie, what, late December last year, started to get those completed. So as the districts are completed, those audit report results are made available, and you should be reviewing those just to get a jump start on any staff who might still be missing an entity ID or maybe doesn't have the correct license for the assignment that they were reported in. So looking at that section earlier rather than later is better because it gives you more time to work with those educators so that they can get their licenses, new applications submitted, or whatever else they need to do in the process of getting those licenses. We do have a new section on the audit result reports page, and there's going to be a new way to view your audit reports. We're still doing a couple tweaks to it to make sure that we're getting all of the right data and it's in the right format. So because it wasn't fully operational yet for this year, we generated the results in the same format as we have done in years past. So this is my test system. I don't have audit results available here, but for your district, you would see typically 4 reports. You can open them in a PDF format or an Excel format, and that tells you there's a report of all of your staff, including the licensed staff with no errors and the errors. There is one report that just shows you the licensing errors, one that is for the special education assignment errors, and then another one called the reject report, which is any staff who is in a licensed assignment but did not have an entity ID. So that's a gap, and they need to have that entity ID and that license in place to be able to hold that position for the school year. So I did make a couple screenshots of some examples of how to interpret the audit reports. These are, again, more licensing related questions. So if there's anything specific about licenses or the feedback here, We'll hopefully get some help from Julie, our licensing expert, for those questions. But this is just one example here. So the error for this case was that license is not valid for this current school year. We're in the 23-24 school year, and you can see here that this person's license expired in June of last year. So the action would be that they need to renew that license or apply for a replacement license. In this example, we've got also license not valid for the current school year, and we have reported grade range outside the license grade range. So in this case, the license that the teacher holds is for grades 4 through 7, but they were reported in an assignment for grades 9 through 12. So in that case, you could be two different things. You could have misreported the grades for the assignment, and if that's the case, then you can correct that with the assignment data. Or if that is the true grade that the teacher is assigned to, then you would need to have them get a different license to cover those grades. And one more example, just to show here, this has one error and then several comments from the licensing team trying to help the educator figure out how to proceed to get that license up to date. All right, so that was the license task or the review audit results task on the checklist. That was task 3A. So we're going to move down to your next task, which was be kind of tied to that, finding the missing entity IDs for staff requiring licensing. Again, if they show up on that reject report, that means that they are in a licensed assignment, but we don't have an entity ID for them. So you would need to get them to apply for the license. The entity ID is created when the application is submitted, not when they get their license. So if they don't have an entity ID, that means they have not even submitted the application. So that would be your step 2 here, or 3B, is making sure that all of the licensed staff have their entity IDs. Task 3C is to load or finalize your contract data. So I'll just do another show of hands here. Who loaded contracts for the preliminary certification and already had that done by the time we got into the 2024 calendar year? Okay, so a good portion of you. So it's completely up to you. If you want to load them early, you can. We're not preventing you from doing it. Or if you want to wait till this final certification window after the preliminary work is done, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So for this task, if you've already loaded your contracts and you feel that you have the right number covering all the staff that you have that require the contracts, there's nothing further you need to do for that task. If you haven't loaded your contracts or might have more to enter, then there's 2 ways that you can do that task of entering those contracts. So clicking that task from the checklist takes you to the upload staff data page. And this is what you would use if you have a large number of contracts that you want to either enter, or if you've got a number of corrections to make, you would want to use this file upload process. The alternative is pulling up each individual staff person's WISE-ID record and typing manually in their contract information. So if you only have a few to do, that's probably not a bad way to go. If you have a larger number or multiple corrections to make, it's probably easier to do that with a contract file upload. So this is the same page that you use to load your assignment files, if that's how you enter your assignment data. So in this case, you would select contract. And we've got a couple notes here for you about the selections you should be making. You would choose your file to upload your contract information. And then depending on what it is you're doing, you will choose one of these 2 radio buttons or change the choice that's defaulted there. So the first option is updating existing data for matching records. That means you've got contracts existing already. And you want to update, or you've got staff existing already and you want to add contract information for them, or you want to edit contract information. So maybe the salaries were incorrect or their years of experience were incorrect. You could choose that option, and that would replace the data that is changing with the new information that's in your file. The second option, delete all data and replace with new upload, is typically used if one example could be if you just want to start from scratch and something went wrong with your initial contract upload file and things were in the wrong columns. You want to get rid of all of that data and just start fresh with your new file. This would be a good option for that. One warning with this is if you have, let's say you have 100 contracts in place and you are making changes to 50 of those contracts. So your contract file has 50 staff WISE IDs in there, but you've still got 50 other staff with contracts you already loaded. If you choose this delete all data option in that scenario, it will delete those other 50 staff contracts that are not in your upload file. So just make sure when you're choosing this second option that all of the staff that you want to have contracts for are included in that file that you're uploading. And then this is a new feature that we have for this year. There is one of the data elements of the contract is a flag that asks, is the salary final for the school year? So is this the final salary, or might there be changes in the future for that person's salary? And that's just a yes or no. If you had contracts that were not finalized, and that's the only, and now they are, and that's the only change that you need to make to your contract information. You don't need to change salaries or add staff. All you need to do is set those salary flags to yes for final. You can use this button and you don't have to do an actual contract upload. Clicking this button will take all of your contracts that you have entered and set that yes, no flag to a yes. So it's just one click, saving you the work of doing that file upload or going in and manually updating those. Any questions on contract information? All right, so the other way to do your contracts is to load those individually on the edit staff page. I'm going to do a shortcut here to pull up a staff person's record from my test group here. So if you just have a few staff or you have a few minor changes that you need to make, you can do that on their edit staff page. And while we are waiting for that to load, so we've got the salary information, the fringe benefit information. We have years of experience and then the highest degree. Those are the, and contract days. Those are the major points that we're collecting. So you can pull up that person's, we're just on the edit staff page here. And then clicking that edit button right there for their contract information, and that lets you make changes to any of these fields, and then click save, and that will update that individual person's contract record. One thing that we've been trying to do over the last few years is add more help information into WISEstaff in general. So trying to put answers to questions you might have within WISEstaff itself. And so anytime you see this little info icon, you can click on that. And that might give you a little bit more information about what's expected for that data element. So contract salary is one that we just recently updated. We've got a link now to the DPI WISE data element page for contract salary, and that page has a link to the WUFAR page, which is the uniform codes for all of the salaries and benefit information. So that's just a quick way for you to get to that information if you have questions about what should be included in your salary. All right, so let's go back to our checklist and see what's next. We covered the audit reports, we covered contracts. Aggregate assignments is something that you may or may not use in your agency or your district. So aggregate assignments are very specific assignment types. It is valid only for cafeteria workers, regular education bus drivers, special education bus drivers, and then plant maintenance or operations staff at the school. And so if your agency contracts with another agency who provides those services for your district and you don't have the identities of the individuals in those roles, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, they're just subcontracted through an agency, you can enter their FTE using this aggregate assignments page rather than creating individual WISE IDs for them and entering their assignments individually. So again, this is optional. If your agency doesn't use any aggregate or subcontracted staff for those positions, you can skip this step. If it is something that you do need to enter, then you click the Add Assignment button there. And it's very similar to the regular Add Assignment page. We've got the aggregate assignment label up here. You would just select the school or district-wide, select the position. Again, it's very limited, just these other support staff and those 4 positions. And you can type in the name and then just the total combined FTE for everyone in that position from that contracting agency. So you might, if you're a large district, you might contract from a couple different bus companies. You would do one of these records for each of those bus companies with the FTE that they provide for your district. And again, that's an optional step, not something that everybody uses. Correct. So some districts have WISE IDs for individuals in those positions, and that's perfectly fine because we do have individual assignment codes for those, and you can load those as you do your other staff. Those are typically if you're paying them directly, if they're hired directly by your agency, you would use that method. This method is more for if you just subcontract and they give you, we're going to give you 10 bus drivers this year, and you don't have their specific details, then that's the option that you would use for that. So it all depends on how your district hires those staff. Yep, and that's perfectly fine if you do have that information.
Don't double.
Right,
One or
yeah.
other.
It's a one or the other. And now that I'm thinking of it, I'll show you possibly an even easier way to make this faster is we just recently also added the ability to upload the aggregate staff information. So back on the upload staff data page where you upload your contract files or your regular assignment files, which is individual WISE ID, individual assignment code. We have a new file type for aggregate assignment. And if you select that, there's a sample template that you can use. You fill in your information. So it's all the same information that you would have entered on the page. The name of the contracting company, the total FTE, your agency number, which school or district-wide the FTE is for. And then you choose that file and click upload, and that creates all of your aggregate staff assignment records for you with that upload rather than entering them manually on that previous page that we looked at. Yep.
You could change, just make sure you don't double count the click a method and then
Clear out the data
Yeah.
and then upload just an FTE.
just realize you'll see, when you look at the totals, you'll see that the regular FTE went down, but the aggregate is up.
Yeah.
Yeah, your for FTE, our guidance right now is the federal guidance, which is basically you calculate FTE on what you consider to be a full-time position and how many hours a year that would be for them. Usually around 2080, but it might be different for your district, but you basically choose what's the standard number of hours and then divide the total number of hours the bus company provides you approximately and to get the total number of FTE. And there are some worksheets we have on our main reporting site. It's like 3 different kind of advised calculations. We just got it from other districts. It's not our recommendation, but use those.
So Josh was mentioning if you do switch over from individual assignments to aggregate assignments, to just be aware that your numbers might look a little off in that year that you're transitioning. And so this would be one of those places where you see that. So in this case, the assignment count is where you see everybody with a WISE ID and an individual assignment. And then this aggregate staff tile is where we show you the aggregate staff. So in that year that you transition, you would potentially see a drop in this assignment count number, and you would start seeing numbers in this aggregate assignment tile. So back to our checklist, we're past the aggregate assignment task. And again, that is optional. If you have completed it and want to check that as a box, just to indicate that it's done, great. You don't have to check it. That won't prevent you from completing your final certification. So next up, this is a big one, verify data quality. So we've got a number of different bullets under here to kind of guide you in the areas that we think would be useful to use within WISEstaff to verify your data quality for the data that you have entered. If anyone attended the new user training that Adam Mueller from our customer services team put on a couple weeks ago, he stressed a number of times as he was talking about data quality tools that we don't know if your data is correct. I don't know if that teacher is supposed to be making that salary. So we can't tell you that. All we can do is to help you look at the data in a number of different ways to help guide you to determining if those numbers are all correct or they're not. And that applies to anything, the FTE, the number of staff that you have. So we're providing tools within WISEstaff for you to use to help you gauge if everything that you've entered is complete and correct. So the first thing we'll do is go back to that data quality dashboard that we looked at very briefly in the beginning. There's a number of sections on here. We are constantly adding to this. So this would be another place that if you've got a suggestion on something that you want to be able to easily see and go to one page to tell you, I want to know this. And you think this would be a good place for that, let us know, send in a suggestion, and we'll see if that's something that we can incorporate in the future. So I'm just going to start at the top of the page here and we'll work our way down. The widgets here that we call them all have to do with licensed assignments, specifically teacher assignments for this last one. So ideally, these would all be green and you would have zeros in your little number bubbles there. So this red unacknowledged missing entity IDs, this is something we saw back on the staff collection checklist. This means I've got 2 staff in a position that they need a license for that they don't have a license. So I'm going to talk about each of these first, and then I'll show you how to drill into these to see what those situations are. This one, expiring staff licenses, that is the same information that you would see if you went up to the licensing download that's available in the Manage Staff Data menu and ran the download from there. So that's kind of a more complete look at all of your staff and their licenses. We do show you what their license expiration dates are. We show you what their background check expiration dates are. That's everything all in one. And we kind of manipulate that a little bit and give you snippets in each of these 2 widgets. So this is only those staff whose licenses are expiring at the end of this year. This one is for staff whose background checks are expiring at the end of this year. So these 2 tiles are really more about planning for next year. They are not going to impact your staff data quality for this year. It's kind of just making sure that you're on track to get everybody relicensed and background checked for next year. And then district-wide teacher assignments is the other one that we have up here, and that's one of the metrics that we show as a widget here because it's very important when we're doing our data reporting to the federal government that we assign teachers to schools. They don't like seeing teachers that are district-wide because there might then be scenarios where there's a school that doesn't look like it as a teacher. So we just let you know here if there are any teachers in a district-wide assignment, and we very strongly encourage you to break those out and assign an FTE amount for each of the schools that they're actually working at. So that's the background of each of those tiles there. Now to see who are the affected staff in some of these that have the number counts here, just click on that widget. And that's going to show you the individuals that make up that metric. So in this case, we had 2 missing entity IDs. So I should see a list here of 2 staff people that don't have entity IDs. And from here, you contact the educator, make sure they're getting their licenses application submitted. Same thing for background checks. You can see who's expiring in there. I believe I'm going to see and hear a recent change, another recent change that we made to revise the date that we're showing for the background check expiration. So previously we showed whatever the date that they got their background check plus 5 years. But I recently learned from Julie that that's not how background check expiration dates work. They expire on June 30th of the 5th year. And if they are not renewed by that date, then they are invalidated. And if that invalidated is not renewed by the end of the calendar year, then they are, what's the status that they're in for that? Fully invalidated. Okay. So the change that we made was to just put all of these as June 30th. So even if somebody got their background check in November, their check it still expires on June 30th of that 5th year after it was initiated. So this would be the list of staff that you would want to follow up with to make sure that they're working on getting those background checks renewed for next year. So back to our data quality dashboard. We have the hiring agency count tiles here. So we've got 6 of these. We have all of your contracts, all of your assignments, specifically all of your licensed assignments, your total staff count, and that's just unique staff people that hold an assignment in your district or your agency. And then the total FTE for those assignments, that does not include the aggregate FTE. This is your aggregate FTE sum. So if you switch over your bus drivers, your cafeteria workers to doing those assignment FTEs in the aggregate, you would see those numbers showing up here. And then these numbers would decrease because they're no longer individually reported with their FTE. So a couple things to note about these tiles. You're looking at a 3-year comparison of the data. So 21, 22, last year and this year, just to help you kind of see where am I at this year? Am I in line with where I was last year? COVID really messed those numbers up because a lot of districts really cut down on staff. And then we saw some huge booms a couple years later. So we're kind of past that a little bit. So definitely for 22, 23, 23, 24, hopefully your numbers are kind of stabilizing there. But what we would want you to do in these sections is just look at your numbers for the current year, make sure it looks like the number that you think you have. Is that the right number of assignments, right number of contracts, right number of staff? If you see something in red, that means that it looks suspicious to us. Again, we can't know whether that is the right number for you, but we want you to look at it because it falls outside of a threshold that we set based on what standard deviations kind of are. So we've got these numbers working in the background. We say if your difference is more than X, make that number red so that it calls your attention to it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. It could be completely fine, and that's your staff plan for this year, and that's the way it's going to be. You don't have to do anything with that number if it's in red. It's not going to prevent you from certifying if it's in red. We just want to call your attention to it, make sure that you've reviewed it, and that you agree that it's the right number. So as with the widgets that we looked at up above, if you want to see the details of any of those metrics, you can just click on that number. So I'm going to look to see who those 13 staff are. And here is that list. So it's got all of this was an assignment tile that I was looking at. So here's all of my assignment information for those staff that I have reported. And again, you can do that with any of these tiles here and even going back to the previous year. So you can see last year's staff and this year's staff. Moving further down the page, then our last 2 sections have to do with teacher salaries. So this section over on the left shows you your average teacher salary for your hiring agency compared to the statewide average for each of the school years. The statewide average will not fill in until after the final snapshot is completed. So we are working up to our final certification deadline, which is going to be March 21st. Once we reach that deadline, Josh is going to take a snapshot. He's going to run a whole bunch of things in the background. And that is basically a picture of all the assignment and contract data for all the staff in the state for the school year. Once that's done, we run a bunch of other numbers and come up with some metrics on average teacher salaries, numbers by districts, total numbers, averages. So once that is done, that's when you would see this year's average statewide teacher salary. But so this metric here, just kind of look at that and make sure that you think that that number matches where you think your average teacher salary number should be. And then your comparison to statewide is really just more for your information. It's not that we're expecting you to correct that or change anything based on that. There is a little bit of helpful information here if you're wondering who makes up these salary numbers. So we say teachers, but what does that really mean? So anytime you see an About the Data link, if you click that, you'll get the full description of who we include in that metric. So for teachers, it's position code 53, but not interns, subcontracted teachers, or teachers hired by a CISA. And that's because we don't have contracts for subcontracted staff, and this is a number that relies on contract information. So that's why we do that. We also want to look at full-time teachers. So we don't want to, somebody who's part-time and their lower salary is going to impact the average for regular full-time teachers. So we're looking at full-time equivalency of 0.95 or greater. And then their contract days must be 160 or greater. So essentially a full-time teaching position is what we're looking at for those salary numbers. So this was averages. This tile over here is your district's actual details for your teacher salaries. Again, it's teachers, so it's those same qualifiers that we just looked at. And this is kind of to point out to you just at a glance, your highest teacher salary across your district, your lowest teacher salary, highest fringe amount, lowest fringe amount, and then do you have any salaries below? This actually, I think, is $24,000 on the live site that you use, or salaries above 90,000. So take a look through this. If the low salary looks like it's not the right number for a full-time teacher, or the high salary, you can hover over that and it'll tell you which staff member that is. And then you can go look at their record and see, well, why do I have that salary? That doesn't look right. So again, just some tips for you to try to get a handle on, does my data look correct? Are the salaries in line? Do I have any really high salaries that might not be accurate, or anything that might have been misreported as a lower salary? So that is the data quality dashboard. Again, giving you some summaries, some details of information from your contracts and your assignments to help you get a picture of, is my data correct? We can't say for sure whether it is or not. We're only guiding you and having you look at things that we think might need some closer attention. So back to our staff collection checklist, that was just one of the data quality tools that we have available. So let's look next at the we've got two reports here. I'm going to focus on the second one just because the test data that I have supports this one over the other one. But this is basically a report that shows you the variance in salary amounts and fringe amounts for your staff from last year to this year. And if I were looking at the admin salary fringe variance report, it's the same information, but only for administrative positions. So anybody with that admin position classification would be included in this report. So this is one where it's kind of in your hands on how you want to see the data. We've got a number of different filters up here that you can change and apply or choose not to apply. If you're not looking at fringe amounts, or you're only looking at fringe amounts, you can check and uncheck those, and that'll focus your results on the data that you're looking for. You can also change the numbers. If you are a district that has higher teacher salaries, you might want to adjust your numbers to make sure that you're seeing the true picture of what it is for a district that has kind of a different salary plan. So you can change these. You can do greater than, equal to, less than, equal to, plug in those numbers that you want to see. If you want to see anybody with a fringe benefit amount that is, let's say, greater than, I'll just do 20% because that might bring me some better numbers here. And then we're applying that filter, and then I'm just going to click the filter button. And what we're doing now is showing you a record for each of the staff where at least one of their salary or fringe amounts qualifies for the filters that you set at the top. So I said up here, show me the staff with salary of less than or equal to 24,000. Fringe is either less than 5% or greater than 20% of their salary, or greater than a 5% salary change from last year to this year. And so it's showing me all of the staff who qualify for those filters. Some are flagging on their fringe benefit amount. Some are flagging on their salary amount. So this is a way to kind of narrow your focus rather than looking at a spreadsheet of 300 staff salaries and going, oh, I think that's right and that looks okay. This is an easier way to go, here's where they should be. Show me the ones that aren't, so that I can focus on those and make sure that those look correct. So again, as with the tiles that we looked at on the data quality dashboard, these aren't necessarily wrong. Maybe somebody had a huge promotion. Maybe they're in a different position this year, and that explains a larger salary for this year. We want to call your attention to it. We'd like you to review it. If it's correct, there's nothing more you need to do. And so again, the admin salary fringe report is the same information, but just for your administrative positions. So Just one tip that I'll give, if I'm ever testing anything or looking at anything, a lot of times looking at a download of data is easier in an Excel spreadsheet. You can sort, you can, weed out the things that don't apply. We'll look at doing that when we get to the validate staff data page. For this specific report, I find that it's more useful to look at the data on the page because that's where you get this red box around the numbers that exceed those thresholds and might be something that you want to pay more attention to. If you would download this, you would just see the raw data. So just a tip that might be helpful for you. All right, so we covered both of those fringe variance reports. The aggregate staff report is just going to show you what you entered for your aggregate staff. If you did, in fact, have aggregate staff that you entered, it would show you the information down here. And again, that's an optional thing based on how your district contracts for those employee types. So that's what we have. Those are the highlights of the data quality tools. There are a number of other reports that we have available that you can use. If you want to do like a full download or list of all of your staff and all of their assignment and contract data, you could do the all staff report. That's literally a dump of everything that we have. It's their demographic information. Like I said, if they have multiple assignments, all the assignments are in there. So that would be like one report that shows a picture of everybody. FTE summary is a report that shows the FTE by position, breaking it out by race and gender. So if you're looking for numbers related to those metrics, you could use this report for that. And that's one that you can look back at previous years for as well. And then your salary report is just a list of all of your staff and their salaries. So if you're trying to just focus on salaries and you want to just run numbers and compare to something else, that might be a clean report for you to use for that. And then staff list is a tool that I use sometimes just to be able to get to a staff record if I don't want to type in their WISE-ID or search for them on the person search page. The staff list is a report that shows you all of the people that have either a contract or an assignment for your district for the current school year. So as soon as when you first come into this page in the brand new school year and you haven't loaded anything yet, this is empty because we don't know who your staff are. We don't have their assignments or contracts. Once you do an assignment upload or a contract upload or add those manually, that's when they'll start to show up here. So this again just shows a couple of bits of their information. It's got their salary amount there, their contract days. If you click the caret over here on the left, you'll see their assignment information if they have it. Apparently that staff person did not, but that's where you can see assignment information. And then what you can do from this page is drill into their WISE or their edit staff record to see information. If you know you need to make a correction to one individual, you could come to this report, find them, click their WISE-ID or this edit button over here. They both go to the same place, and that takes you to their edit staff record where you can view their contract information and their assignment information and make changes. The red X over here on the left is to be used with caution. If you click that button, it will delete the contract and all assignments for that staff person for the current school year. Joanne, where are you? Thanks to your recommendation, we have updated the tool to the help tip on there that clarifies that it is for this year because it wasn't clear before. You don't want to delete everything for all the years. You only want to get rid of this year. So we added that in there. So thank you for bringing that up. So that is just an easy way. If you realize, this person is in another district this year, they're not supposed to be with us. You can just easily remove their contract and assignments by clicking that red X. All right, so that is all of the reports here. So again, back to our checklist because we're kind of working our way down and making sure that we're covering everything that needs to be looked at and done leading up to that final certification. So done with verified data quality. Just for your own peace of mind, if you're confident that everything's been reviewed and looks good, you can check that box to show that it's completed. It's not a required step for you to do that. Next up is the run data validation page. And this is something that there's a couple different ways to approach. So I'll just kind of do some highlights first, and then we'll talk about the different ways that you can go in and attack the validation errors and warnings that you might have. So again, I preloaded some test information to make an example of this district here. So we've got 80 errors, 87 warnings. Anything that's in red errors need to be resolved, and warnings need to be acknowledged or resolved in order for you to complete your final certification. If you have even one left, it won't let you click that button and save that you've indicated that your certification is complete. So anything over here that's not a green 0 is something that we want you to take a look at. The verify and clear info messages is one that the system will remove those for you when we run that snapshot process. The info messages are things that tell you that maybe you loaded too much data that we don't need, and we'll clear it out when we run that snapshot. Maybe you loaded a contract for a person that has an assignment that we don't require a contract for. So you'd get a message there saying that we're going to do that. When we run the snapshot process, we delete that contract because it's not something we need based on that assignment. So again, following the path of clicking on our task there will take us to the page where we can do that, the work to clear those errors and warning messages. So couple things to talk about here at the top of the page. The date that the validation was last run will show up here at the top. Are we currently in daily refreshes in production?
Yeah.
Okay, so every morning about 4 a.m. we kick off a statewide validation and refresh this information for all the districts based on what's current at the time that we do that refresh. So if you see that the date up here, for example, this was March 5th, yesterday afternoon, if you go in and make some changes and add some information, correct some information, and you want to make sure that that cleared out your warnings or your errors, you can click this refresh validation button, and that will refresh and run through all of the rules again for just your district's data. And hopefully then you would come out on the end with 0s for warnings and errors, or at least a reduction in what you had. So you're welcome to click that refresh validation when you want to get like a cleaner picture or a current update of where you're at, or you can wait for the next day and it'll do that for you automatically. The clear non-required data button over here will clear out that data that I mentioned a minute ago, where it might be a contract that's not needed based on the assignment. It might be questions that were answered for an assignment that we don't really need. But the caution for that is that you should make sure that you don't click this until you have all of your contracts and assignments entered for the year. Reason being, if you would click that and it might delete a bunch of contracts because it didn't think we needed it. But then if you change an assignment and now they do require a contract, we already deleted it because we didn't think we needed it. So this is something you can do, but just make sure that you're doing it when you're done with everything. All your contracts and assignments are loaded, and it's kind of like your last check, wanting to make sure that everything looks good. Like I said, the system will do that automatically. So you don't have to do it. It's just if you want to make sure that you're looking at a clean page with 0 warnings and errors and info messages. So you've got a count of how many errors and warnings currently exist based on your data as it is at the moment. Errors, there's either it is an error or it's not. They have to be resolved to do your final certifications. Warnings are the ones where a warning is something where we think the data might be wrong, but we're not sure. So we let you know that you should look at it. If you look at it and say, yep, that's correct, you would acknowledge the warning. So the warning still exists, but it goes into a separate pile called acknowledged warnings. And you don't see those on this page unless you click this button here because you want to see the acknowledged warning. So errors, again, it's just either it's an error or it's not. You have to resolve those before you can certify. For your warnings, if a warning shows that the data is incorrect and you resolve the data, the warning goes away. If the data is correct and the warning still exists, then you can just acknowledge it by clicking in that box there, and that will put it in that acknowledged pile and let you proceed with your final certification. So a couple examples, and we've got some right here of error warnings that could be acknowledged are if the years of experience don't line up from this year to last year. So for most staff people, they're working in your district. There's a total years of experience. There's a LEA experience and total experience. So in any district. And that accumulates 1 year for every year that they're in your district. If somebody comes to you from a different district, their LEA years of experience with you would be 1 if they're brand new to you, and then the total years of experience would be whatever they had at the previous district plus 1. But you might find out by talking to the staff person that that previous number wasn't correct and they've been teaching more or fewer years than were reported. It's best if you true up and enter the correct years of experience with your information, so that could trigger a warning. If you say that this person has 10 years, previous district said 12, well, there's a gap there. So why is that a gap? So that would be a warning. You can just acknowledge that warning. You can enter comments for those indicating that this is why it's still okay and that the information that we have is correct. But it's not required for some warnings. So we do have a list right here that says if you are acknowledging any of these warning codes, you must require a comment telling us why you are acknowledging the warning, not resolving it. So one example of those is those missing entity IDs. Teachers and staff people that are in licensed assignments need to be licensed. If they don't have an entity ID, we want to know why that is. And so we don't let you just acknowledge that. You have to enter a comment indicating why that teacher does not or educator does not have a license at the time their assignment is reported. So as far as working through your information here in this grid to get through your errors and warnings, you can use filters on these columns here. Let's say I only want to look at my errors because I want to focus on those first because those are the most important. I can select error, click filter, and now I'm only looking at those errors. So you can do that with any of these columns that have the filter icon on there. So you can choose to do this a couple different ways. One of Josh's suggestions that I like is to download all of the validations and then group them so that you can kind of get a picture of where my errors are. There are a lot of things with experience years being incorrect, or are there a lot of things where I'm missing contracts? And so there's 10 warnings where if I enter one contract, that would clear out all, or errors would clear out all of those errors. So if you want to download all of your validation information, you can use this button here, and that will dump everything that you see here into an Excel file, and then you can manipulate that however works best for you to get through those and to kind of get a sense of what you need to do to work through those errors and warnings. Or you can just do it on the page here and go one by one. So depending on what the type of error or warning is, you're going to need to go to a different place to look at the data and or correct that information. So typically you'll see a resolve link over here, and if you click that, that's going to take you to the place where this error or warning should be resolved. So this might go to a different place depending on what the error is. If it's something to do with data for a specific individual person, which we can see here because that's their name, then it's going to go to their edit staff page. And in this case, we're also showing you those errors and warnings at the top of the page. So you could look at this and see, oh, I need to look at their years of experience and make sure those are correct. I also can see that there's no assignment for this person, even though they have a contract. So should I be deleting the contract, or should I, because they're not with us this year, or should I be adding assignments because they are? So that's one example of where that resolve link would go. There are some others that go to the staff list page, and I don't know if I can come up with one on the fly, but there could be one that says your district does not have a reading specialist, and every district has to have a reading specialist. So if we find that you don't, there's no edit staff record that we can take you to when you click on that resolve link because there isn't a staff in that position. So if you would click that resolve link, you would go to your staff list page where you could then presumably review who you do have, what assignments everybody is holding, and then realize, oh, I need to put this person in the reading specialist assignment. So working through your errors and warnings is kind of a matter of picking your preference. Do you want to go one by one? Do you want to group them? And then just understanding what it takes to resolve each of those different situations. One other thing that I will mention is that each of these, I think might not be all, but a very, very high number of our codes here links to a knowledge base article that will provide a little bit more information about why that error or warning occurred and what you can do to resolve that. So anytime you see a code that's got the blue font and the link underneath it, We give you the message over here. This says total years experience is less than expected, but not really how to resolve it or what else you should do. So if you need more information, click on that link and you'll go to the knowledge base article with a little bit more info on what you should do or why that error occurred. Question?
Yeah, there's a knowledge base. If you click on, I think when you go to the message, then you get to the knowledge base area, article search, I think. On the top. I think that's the home for it. So this is all the different knowledge base articles, or not just WISE ID, WISEstaff, but WISE data.
Yeah, so you could filter by staff to narrow it down. I'm not sure. Let's see if this would be helpful. Yeah, you'd need to get to a place where you can see all of the codes for it to be useful. But I'm kind of thinking that might be something that could be helpful. Would anyone want to see that list and be able to see what the different validations and warnings are? Okay, so maybe we'll put some notes together on how we might make that work. Maybe make it a list available within WISEstaff where you can just see here's maybe all and group them by all the assignment related errors and warnings, all the contract related errors and warnings. So we will take that suggestion. So any other questions about the validate staff data process and what you're seeing here and how to get started resolving any of those? And again, we've got our open lab session starting at 2:15 today. So if you're available to stick around for that and do have specific questions and want some one-on-one help, we're more than happy to sit with you and answer any of those questions. Okay, so let's get back to our checklist and see where we're at. We've done validate staff data. So once you're through all of that, ideally you've got all green zeros over here on the right. You might see if you have acknowledged warnings, those might show up in orange and those are okay. As long as there's nothing in red, then you should be clear for completing your final agency certification, which is your last step in this section. And we'll click on that link to go to that page. This is the same page you go to when you submit your preliminary certification in November. And so now you're going to see a new section at the top for final agency certification. It is very similar to the previous section, but now we're showing you just a repeat of those data quality dashboard tiles. Just as another final check, make sure everything looks good. There's nothing in red that shouldn't be. So if those numbers all look good and all of your errors and warnings are resolved, then you should, and mine won't be in this case because I've got open errors and warnings. But if that is the case, you will have the ability to check this box saying that you're certifying that you have reviewed all of the information. It's correct to the best of your knowledge, represents all of the staff in your district who are required to be reported. And then you click the save button and then you're done. So that is the final certification. The actual certification step is very simple. It's everything you have to do leading up to it to make sure that your data is complete and correct. So once you have done that, you will see the notation back on the staff collection checklist that that step has been completed. So you would see a check mark here and then you would be done. So that opportunity to do your final certification does open tomorrow morning. And so you'll have from tomorrow through March 21st to complete all of your tasks, get all of your contracts entered or revised, any assignments that you didn't get to for the preliminary certification, running through your data quality steps, resolving your errors and warnings, and then completing that final certification. Again, deadline March 21st. This last task on here is one that is just informational. So once the final license, this is the final snapshot. So once Josh runs the process to collect everything that you reported, put it in one place, which is what Julie's licensing team uses to run the final licensing audit. And we use to generate our public staff reports and a number of other different reports that we use. Once that is done, then you'll see the check mark there as well. Again, that's just informational. And at that point, when that snapshot is done, WISEstaff is read-only. You can no longer make changes to any of your assignments or contracts. The one exception to things that you can still change is adding an entity ID. So if you have any staff with missing entity IDs and it's March 22nd and you still had some and they get those entity IDs, you can still update those in their WISE ID record through May. Through the end of May, we'll say, because then the licensing audit's going to start in June. So still pursue getting those missing entity IDs for any staff who don't have those. If you should, I'll back up one step. So we run the snapshot, we gather all the data, we generate the public staff reports. So I'll quickly show those. And this is, as the name indicates, available to the public. This is what other districts use. Reporters, journalists, people researching staff salaries, research institutes use all of these reports to gather their information on our educators. So we've got a number of different reports there. The data that you submit is what makes up these reports. And these are available typically end of April, I think is our timeline for that. If those reports come out and you're looking at them, or even if you find something on your own that was incorrect, so you submitted something incorrectly, you didn't have a chance to update it before the deadline, or you missed adding an assignment or some information, you're not able to edit that in WISEstaff any longer. But what you can do is submit a data errata letter. And that's done via the WISE admin portal, which is a separate application. I think it's part of WISE data, right? It's like a tab within WISE data. So your district administrator probably likely has access to that. So you could submit the data errata, just letting us know, I missed reporting these teachers, or the staff salaries were incorrect. Here's what they should have been. So that any of those researchers looking at this information can go. Also, we publish that in the data errata information publicly on our DPI website. So any of those researchers can go there and see an explanation for why something that they're looking at in a report doesn't look like what it should. So I will just show you what that looks like, if I can get to that quickly. We don't encourage personal information in the data errata because, again, this is published publicly, but just generally, third grade teachers' staff salaries were incorrect, or we missed having, if they're saying somebody's holding an assignment, that would be, they could say this person held this assignment if you missed it.
It's okay to put staff info, but not birthday.
Yeah, no personal information for the staff should be included there. So data errata is on our website, and there are a number of different pages. Here we go. Divvied up by collection type. So we've got our WISEstaff data errata. So here are all of the data errata letters that were submitted indicating that they had some sort of an error in their data that's no longer editable. All right, we made it to the end of the checklist. Covered all the steps. We've got a couple minutes left for questions. This session ends at 2:15, but again, we're staying in here for the open lab. Feel free to stick around if you can. If you have specific questions, want more demos, we can do whatever you need. Joanne, what can I help you with? Correct. Yes. So great point. What's a good answer for that, Julie? So the way to know that it's fixed is if they don't flag on the final audit. But you can go and look at information. Let me show you one thing that's a handy tool for looking at the licenses that line up with the assignments that you have a staff person in. So this is on the edit staff page. And if you had an error flagged on the audit report that somebody's grades were not reported correctly, or if they didn't have the right license type, and you've made the corrections to the assignment, or they have obtained the valid license for that assignment, you can look at their assignment information on their individual edit staff record. So I'm going to select, let's go to a teacher. do elementary. It's a nice easy one. So some of this page, you can see which license types are available or are required eligible for the assignment that you've selected up here. So if you've got a staff person and you have their assignment visible here, below is where you'll see what they should have for a license. And it would just be one of these options here. And then below that grid, you can see what license the individual actually has. So you can see, does this here line up? So here we've got, and this is all test data, so it might not, but these are the licenses this individual holds. 13, 16, 10, 88. These are what are required for the position that they're reported in. So in that case, they do have a valid license in that instance. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's a great point. Once you're looking at the preliminary or the final audit results for that matter, and you make corrections to their assignment information or the staff person obtains additional licensing, the information in those audit reports will not change because these are a snapshot. They're not dynamic. We hope to get to that one day. But for now, you have to use other tools available to make sure that the changes that you've made are accounting for whatever errors you saw in those audit reports. If we have their entity ID and the license application is being worked in the background and the license will eventually be issued, as long as it is still issued by the end of June, Julie, then they're in good shape. So the snapshot is just to lock in their assignment information. The license process can still continue in the background up through May, June, once the final audit is run. Question? Julie, can I ask you to answer that one?
But we would think that finally. What licenses they have, what they need to. And for the. Should be. They show the data rather that she's. Correcting the assignment. If the license is. Based on the way they should have been reported. Then, you know, unfortunately. That's. The final snatch. There's only. Yes, it's just gonna be. Yes, just the flag.
Yeah, that's why we had the preliminary audit to make sure the assignments are right, and if they're not, you should get flagged there and get it corrected by the final audit.
Any other questions? Otherwise, again, we're going to be here for another, I think, till 4 o'clock. So if you have questions and you want individual attention, feel free to stick around. Thank you all for coming. We do have a QR code up on the screen here. If you would want to scan that and submit feedback on this session, we would appreciate hearing from you. Thank you very much.